All right, so here's where you see how the pins are laid out, and the marking gauge has been used for that purpose. I'll just zone in here a bit and you can see that. You can see I used a red pen to lay out that mark and flip it on the other side, like right there. So you go and lay those out, and then I put this black tape right across the bottom, and I'll show you how that's going to be used later. But the purpose it serves now is to very clearly mark the position of my cutting all the way down to that gauge line. Now I'm going to start to cut the tails, and I'll show you what I do. It's a straightforward process. This is a Rob Cosman saw, and he's the saw, and I'll show you how I use that to cut. You just use the beginning of the saw blade and put your thumb there, and I want to cut. So I'm cutting that line, and I want to cut just right on the groove. And I want to cut just on the side of the red, and then make sure that I'm cutting down. I want to cut straight across, and then cut down perfectly on that line. And I want to come right down to the end of the line, just like that. You can see that that's perfect across. I'll show you the details on these cuts, and it's down to the line. Continue with that same angle all the way across. I'll just do a couple more. Now I'll show you the details of those saw cuts, and we'll see how good a job I got on them. There's the first one. It's just to the right of the line. It goes all the way down. The next one, it looks good. Third one looks okay. So the only way to get cuts like that is practice. Practice and standing in the same position and just doing it several times. I'll cut the rest of them, I'll show you the result, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now we got the tail board on top, the pin board down below, and we've already cut all of the slots in the tail board, and we're going to use those slots to mark the pin board by shifting the tail board over to the left and to the right in order to cut an exact thickness of the saw blade. So the saw blade is set up with a marking gauge so that it's just that thickness, including the kerf and the thickness of the metal itself. And then one shifts the tailboard over to the left to start off with, and you shift it over the thickness of that kerf. What does that do? Well, if I shift the board to the left and I cut on the right-hand side of the tails all the way through, is the right-hand side, then when it's shifted back, it's going to be right on top of that cut because I've shifted it a thickness of the blade. And so thereby, this is Rob Cosman's method, and it's a marvelous method. And you ensure that you're cutting exactly on top, or exactly where you need to cut so that the dovetail fits in just right. The other thing I've learned to do through bitter hard experience is to clamp everything down. You can imagine, you don't want this board to move while you're making the cuts to mark the pin board, you know, through the tailboard. And if it does move, then you've thrown things off. So I've clamped it in the vise. I've clamped it down here with another clamp to the table, and I've clamped the board on the top so that it's not going to move. I may have to adjust this a little bit so that I can make the cuts, but I know it's not going to move while I make all those 10 or so cuts. So that's what we do. And the way we start is, like I say, we moved the tailboard to the left, so we're going to cut on the right-hand side. And we're just going to ease this little saw blade. That's the thickness of the dovetail saw, and we're going to mark it down below. And just stick it in there, pull it back. Stick it in there, pull it back. Continue to do this 5 or 6 times until you're sure you got a cut. It's at an angle like that on the front, so you can reach all the way into there and push down, pull out. Push down, pull out. Push down, pull out. And you can see why I wanted to clamp this, because this is kind of vigorous action and it would be hard to just hold this still all the time. So now I'm moving to the next one on the right, pulling back, down in, pull back. Continuing that process as I mark the rest. We marked all the ones on the right hand side, so now we'll loose the clamp and move the tailboard to the right. Again, a thickness of the saw kerf blade. This time we'll put the marking gauge on the bottom and then slide the entire board over to the right, just like that. Slide it over to the right, holding it very carefully. That's the other thing I didn't mention. I've got tape underneath here so it jams against the pin board and stays right on my gauge line. Check that again. Looks good. Check it again, make sure I've got this right. Yeah, good. Now, we move the tailboard to the right, so now we cut on the left-hand side. Sorry, we cut with this little saw. We cut in the right-hand side, so now we're going to cut on the left. Cutting on the left. Alright, so those should all be marked. We'll take the clamps loose and we'll see what we did. I'll move this back. And there you can see, I'll show you the detail. They're all marked just like they should be. Now you can see all the marks that I made on the pin board and all the way through, and hopefully they're accurate, and so we can proceed with the next process. Once we've cut the pins with the dovetail saw, then we're going to cut out the waste that's listed here, that's shown here. I've cut it out on several places before, but I do that with a fret saw. And usually the blade is down on a coping saw, fret saw down straight, so you cut pulling like this. I've twisted the blade so it goes at an angle, so you can set the blade down in there, and then you rotate it and start cutting, and try to cut as close as reasonable to the gauge line. So I'll just demonstrate that with this one. We'll cut that like that. If you're just careful, you get right close to that gauge line. And it takes a bit of effort, but it's doable. You have to be careful when you get to this part, because you don't want to cut into the pin. You just come at an angle. And there's the piece. And I'll cut the rest of these offline, because it's the same process. Once we've made the cuts and have started the process of cleaning out the waste, it's a matter of just chiseling that out. And we have cut this portion with the fret saw, as I indicated before, and now we just sneak up on the gauge line. If we went all the way to where the actual gauge line is right there, we would not get the result we want. We'd have a jagged line on the gauge line. So we just sneak up on it and take bits and pieces off, just like this. Do the next one, cut in halfway or more. Sneak up on this one a little bit more. And now we're ready to go directly on that gauge line right in here. I know it's not easy to see, but there's a line that goes there that we set up before. So we'll sneak up on this a little bit more. And then we'll go right to the gauge line. And keep in mind that there's an angle on this pin. And we clean it up with a smaller chisel in the corner. Making sure we always got the back of the chisel toward the piece. And that gets that piece, and then there's another little piece in this corner. Clean it up a little bit. And that's the process. And it's the same for the rest of these. I've done the ones over in here already. As you can see, there's maybe a little cleanup to do, but now I've got the rest of these to do in here, all the way over to this side. And I'll just do those all off camera, because it's the same. All right, so we're back, and we got a new blade in the fret saw. And what I have to do is, I'm gonna go down to these grooves and then cut, but if I turned at 180, I'd be hitting. So I've got to twist the blade so that it cuts at an angle. And I just twist the blade so it cuts at about a 90-degree angle. This doesn't break the blade, it'll just turn it. And so that I can test just where it goes down in, and see what that's like. There, just like that. And then I'll put one closer so you can see what I'm talking about. It goes down in that. I just turn the blade, get it down a ways, then just turn the blade. I want to cut as close to the gauge line as I can, and just go like this. And cut these little pins out. That little pin is coming out, so I'll do that with another one here. You can see the process go almost all the way down and come up a little bit. Make a turn with the saw and just cut straight across. Grab the little pin, you can feel it getting loose, and just pull it out. And I'll do the rest of these offline, because it's basically the same process. Put some finish on these dovetails, and I have not planed them, I have not sanded them. This is the initial fit up. So really quite happy with that. There's some marks that need to be sanded down, but they look quite nice. Thank you.